Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. It was at a logistics drive downtown. I was helping with accounting for donations, and Evelyn was the one directing volunteers with a clipboard in her hand. Evelyn carried herself with precision, like she knew how to run a room without raising her voice. When she came over to ask about the numbers I was tallying, I noticed her sharp tone wasn't arrogance, it was focus. We ended up talking long after the event wrapped. She told me she worked in organizational training for a mid-sized firm. I just started building a consultancy of my own, nothing big yet, but steady enough to pay my bills. What stood out was how quickly the conversation shifted from polite small talk to real things, careers, family backgrounds, what kind of life we wanted. She was clear. She didn't want drama, just progress. I liked that. Our dating rhythm wasn't flashy. We met for early coffee before work, walked the riverfront on Sundays, and made plans like two people who thought ahead. A year in, Evelyn still asked about my projects with real curiosity, and I admired how she handled challenges at her job. There was no push and pull for control, only respect. 2 years after we met, we got married in a modest ceremony. No rented hall, no oversized guest list, just the people who mattered. Evelyn moved into the house I already owned, bought with my grandmother's insurance payout years earlier. The place wasn't huge, but it was mine outright. She seemed happy with that, even joked once that she'd never thought she'd marry into a place that didn't come with a mortgage. Our finances were simple. We kept individual accounts, opened a joint one for shared costs, and lived within what we earned. I paid property taxes and building fees. She handled groceries and utilities. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. In those first couple of years, Evelyn wasn't chasing late nights or endless outings. She had a handful of friends she saw once in a while, but most of her time was either with me or on her own interests. We made decisions together, talked about what came next, and built routines that felt like they'd last. At that point, I thought we were set on the same path. I had no reason to expect otherwise. Around our third year of marriage, Evelyn reconnected with two women she knew from college. Evelyn introduced them casually at first, Maya Collins and Lena Brooks. It wasn't until later that I saw just how much influence they carried. Maya had gone through 2 divorces and built a podcast out of her experiences. She spoke openly about how she'd wasted years catering to men and how she was now focused solely on herself. According to Evelyn, Maya framed it as self-sovereignty. The way Evelyn repeated that phrase told me it struck a chord. Lena was different, single, restless, and working in event promotions. She thrived on nightlife and surprise plans, always bragging about the thrill of living without ties. Evelyn said Lena was the fun one, someone who could make ordinary evenings feel like an adventure. At first, I encouraged Evelyn's renewed friendships. She hadn't built much of a network since moving into my neighborhood, and I thought reconnecting with familiar faces might help. When she said she was meeting Maya and Lena for dinner once a month, it seemed harmless. She came home with stories, laughter in her voice, like she'd rediscovered part of her old self. I thought it was good for her. But slowly, their influence seeped in. Our simple check-ins, "When will you be home?" or "What's the plan this weekend?" turned into points of friction. Evelyn would roll her eyes and say, "Do I need permission to step out?" That was new. We had always coordinated out of respect, not because either of us demanded control. She also started speaking differently about our life together. Before, she said things like, "We should plan for this," or "Our next step could be." Now she said, "I want to do this," or "I've been thinking about what I need next." Small words, but they changed the tone completely. Nights out became more frequent too, twice a week. Then 3. Sometimes she'd walk in close to midnight, brush past my questions, and disappear into the bedroom with her phone glowing in her hand. I told myself it was just a phase, that she was simply reconnecting with old friends. But every time she came home from those outings, she carried with her new arguments, new complaints, as if the conversations she had with them were now happening inside our marriage. The orbit of our relationship was shifting, and I wasn't the one pulling the gravity anymore. By the 4th year, the changes weren't subtle anymore. Evelyn started framing ordinary conversations as battles for control. One night, I asked, "Are you going to be home for dinner tomorrow?" She set her fork down and said, "Why do you always need to know where I am?" It feels like surveillance. I answered evenly. It's not surveillance. I'm just trying to plan a meal. Her eyes narrowed. That's what men always say when they want to keep tabs. Planning is just another word for control. That wasn't Evelyn talking. That was Maya's podcast echoing in my kitchen. The shifts kept stacking. She began skipping family commitments, telling me last minute she had better things to do. Once she texted at 9 p.m. that she wasn't coming home that night because Lena had dragged her into some overnight collab for an event. When I asked about it the next day, she brushed me off with, "You wouldn't understand." At home, she started posting articles on her social media about women trapped in soft prisons of comfort and partners who confuse control with care. She never tagged me, but I didn't need to be tagged to know who those posts were about. I kept calm, asked questions directly, and never raised my voice. But her answers grew evasive. If I pressed, she accused me of being rigid. If I stayed quiet, she accused me of being indifferent. Either way, it became an argument. One Saturday morning, I brought up a bill from our joint account. This charge from Friday night. What's it for? Her face hardened. Do I need your approval for how I spend money? I said, approval? No, but I expect transparency. We agreed the joint account was for us, not individual projects. She leaned back in her chair, almost smiling. Maybe our definitions are different now. That line stuck with me. It was her way of saying the rules had changed, unilaterally. The house we once shared like a team started to feel like two strangers testing boundaries, and she was pushing harder every week. The breaking point came one evening when I walked in from work and found Evelyn at the dining table with her laptop open, a half-packed suitcase beside her chair. She looked up casually. I'm joining a creative collective in Bali, a month-long residency. Flights are booked. I stared at the suitcase, then back at her. Booked with whose money? She closed the laptop. The deposit came from our joint account. I'll cover the rest later. I kept my voice level. You withdrew $3,000 without a word to me? For a month out of the country? Her jaw tightened. Charlie, it's not about the money. This is about me investing in myself. I've always supported your work. Now it's my turn. I shook my head. Supporting each other doesn't mean announcing life-altering decisions after they're already made. Marriage is supposed to be discussion first, action second. Her eyes flashed. That's your rule. My friends don't need a committee vote to live their lives. I sat down opposite her. This isn't about your friends. This is about respect. If you want to take a trip, we can talk about it. You don't drain our account and tell me after the fact. She pushed the suitcase against the wall with her foot. Maybe I'm done asking permission. That was never what it was. It was coordination, partnership. But Evelyn had already decided to frame it as control. That night, she moved into the spare bedroom, saying she needed space to reset. What followed wasn't silence. It was a cold performance. She walked past me in the hallway without a glance, ate dinner alone, and answered my attempts at conversation with clipped one-word replies. I gave her room, thinking the tension might ease. It didn't. Each day that passed, she seemed more certain of her new rules and less interested in anything resembling compromise. It was no longer about Bali. It was about whether our marriage meant anything at all to her. It was a Thursday night when Evelyn finally showed her hand. I came home late from a client meeting and found her waiting at the dining table, a neat stack of papers in front of her, no ring on her finger. She didn't waste time. Charlie, I want to live for myself, without you. I've already spoken to an attorney. These are the separation documents. I looked at the papers, then at her. Calmly, I said, so that's it. No discussion, no counseling, just papers. Her arms crossed tightly. Discussion? Every time we talk, you act like I owe you explanations. I don't. I deserve freedom. I need space to build my own life. I nodded once. Then go ahead. Live for yourself, but not in my house, not on my dime. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she hadn't expected that response. For the first time in months, she looked uncertain. You think you can just throw me out? She asked, voice rising. No, I said evenly. I'm saying you don't get both. You don't get to leave the marriage but keep the benefits of it. The house is mine. Bought before we even met. Paid for in full. Your name isn't on the deed. If you want out, you're free to go. But you won't be living here, and you won't be drawing from my resources." She snapped back, "I'll take half of everything. That's what marriage means." I stood there, steady. "Then we'll let the court decide. But you already know whose name is on the title, and it isn't yours." The next morning she was gone, suitcase in hand, staying at Maya's place. From that point on, communication went through attorneys. The woman who once planned meals with me, walked markets with me, now wanted to dismantle everything we'd built, and she thought she'd walk away with half of what I owned. For the first time since all this started, I wasn't angry. I was resolved. The legal fight stretched for more than a year. Evelyn's lawyer came in swinging, claiming she had rights to my house, part of my firm's revenue, and even spousal support. My attorney, Robert Hayes, kept things sharp. He slid the deed across the table during mediation. The house was purchased 3 years before marriage, paid in full with inherited funds. No joint contributions. This is separate property. Evelyn's lawyer shifted tactics. Mrs. Reed's domestic contributions, managing meals, errands, freed Mr. Reed to build his consultancy. That created value. Robert countered with bank records. Joint account shows proportional expenses. Her payments went to groceries and utilities. Normal household costs. My client covered taxes, insurance, and all major repairs from his own accounts. No evidence of co-investment in property. Evelyn's face flushed during those sessions. She interrupted more than once, snapping, "You're twisting it. He made me believe this was our home." The judge had to remind her twice to let her counsel speak. Then came the Bali charge. Robert laid out the statement. Funds withdrawn from joint account without consent. Used for a non-joint purpose. This isn't a partnership. It's unilateral. That point cut deep. Her side backed off on pressing for more of the joint savings once that withdrawal was highlighted. In the end, the judgment was clear. Evelyn got her share of the joint account balance and her personal belongings. She kept her car, which she had always paid for. No spousal support. Our marriage was deemed too short, and she was fully employable. No claim to the house, no share of my firm. The outcome landed with a thud. Evelyn left the courtroom stiff, lips pressed tight, not saying a word. For me, the relief wasn't in keeping the house, it was in the clarity. The law had drawn the line that Evelyn refused to see. Marriage means shared effort, not unilateral withdrawal with guaranteed backup. Walking out of that courthouse, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the rules of my life again. 2 years passed before I heard from Evelyn again. By then, the dust of the divorce had settled. I focused on my clients, expanded the firm, and kept my life quiet. One Tuesday evening, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen since the court dates. Evelyn Reed. For a moment, I just stared at it. Against better judgment, I answered. Her voice was softer than I remembered. "Charlie. Hi. It's been a while." I stayed neutral. "It has." She hesitated, then launched in. "I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't important. Things are rough right now. I left my job last year to freelance, but it hasn't worked out. I'm behind on rent. I just need some help, a loan to get back on my feet." I let her words hang in the silence. She rushed to fill it. "I'll pay you back, I promise." I thought, even if we're not together, maybe we could still support each other. Finally, I spoke. "Evelyn, you told me you wanted to live for yourself, without me, and that's what you've been doing." Her tone sharpened. "So you're really going to hold that against me? After everything we had?" "No," I said. "I'm holding you to your choice. You wanted independence, and you got it. Asking me to cover your rent now isn't independence. It's dependence on the man you walked out on." There was a long pause before her voice cracked with anger. "You're cruel, vindictive. You'd rather watch me drown than lift a hand." I stayed steady. "I'm consistent. You wanted freedom, and I respected that. I'm not going to undermine it now by stepping back into a role you rejected." She exhaled sharply, muttered something I didn't catch, and hung up. I sat there staring at the quiet phone. No anger, no satisfaction. Just confirmation that I'd made the right call years ago. After that call, I blocked Evelyn's number and her social accounts. There was nothing left to salvage, no conversation that could undo the choices she had made. For the first time since I met her, the chapter was closed on both sides. Life moved forward. My firm grew steadily, and I found the balance I hadn't realized I was missing. A year later, I met Claire Jensen, a product manager with a calm presence and a sharp mind. We built our relationship carefully. No rushing, no blurred lines. She had her career, I had mine, and every major decision was a conversation, not an announcement. One Saturday, while Claire and I were out for coffee, I saw Evelyn across the street. She was walking fast, head down, phone clutched in her hand. For a second, our eyes met. No words, no wave, just a brief recognition. She looked away first. That moment said more than any conversation ever could. She had chosen her path, and I had chosen mine. The balance of power was no longer in question. Looking back, I don't regret the way I handled it. Evelyn once told me, straight to my face, "I want to live for myself, without you." My answer then, and my answer now, is the same. Go ahead. But not in my house, not on my dime. I didn't slam doors or shout or beg. I drew a boundary and stood by it. That boundary was what saved me, from losing my home, from losing my business, from losing myself. Today, I live in the same house I once thought was ours. It no longer feels like a battlefield. It feels like mine, steady and unshaken. Claire and I sit at that same dining table where Evelyn once dropped divorce papers, but now the conversations are about travel plans, client schedules, and weekend dinners with friends. The house didn't change. The rules did. And in the end, that made all the difference. Thank you for watching.